The bobcat wasn't supposed to stop. She was hungry, focused, and fast, stalking a rabbit trail with her belly low to the earth, ears locked forward. But then she heard it, a sound that cut through the forest like a blade. It wasn't prey. It wasn't predator. It was something else entirely. A short, desperate yelp, so soft it almost disappeared between the trees, but raw enough to make her freeze mid-step. She turned. The cry came again, weaker this time. High-pitched, broken, like something that shouldn't be alive anymore was still trying to be. The wind shifted. She sniffed. The scent was unfamiliar, faint, but wrong. Not danger, not food, just wrong. Her muscles tensed. She moved off. Her trail. 30 feet later, she found it. Lying in a patch of dirt beneath a fallen tree was a puppy. No collar, no scent of mother, no warmth. Its ribs were sharp beneath matted fur, and its paws twitched like it had been dreaming of running but never made it. It was so still, it could have been dead. But then its eyes cracked open, cloudy, unfocused, terrified. The bobcat didn't move. She should have turned around. This wasn't her kind, this wasn't survival, but she didn't. She stared, and the puppy, barely able to lift its head, let out a tiny whimpering cry. Not bark, not howl, just a breath that sounded like giving up. Something inside her shifted. She took a step closer. The puppy flinched, rolled weakly onto its side, and let out a choked squeal as if expecting pain. But the bobcat didn't lunge. She didn't growl. She just stood there, tail twitching, ears perked. Every instinct screamed to move on, to leave it, to forget. But she didn't. The pup tried again to crawl, dragging one paw through the mud, its body trembling from effort. And that's when she made her decision, not as a hunter, not even as a bobcat, but as something no one would expect. She stepped closer again, slow, careful, and lowered her head toward the tiny, shaking creature. It didn't move, it didn't fight. It just looked up, as if it didn't even believe help was possible. The forest went silent, and that was the moment everything changed. He nudged it. Not hard, just enough for the pup's body to shift slightly in the dirt. The reaction was immediate. The puppy let out a small startled gasp and went completely still, as if bracing for the worst. But the blow never came. The bobcat backed off by inches, watching it carefully. Her eyes weren't filled with hunger. They were filled with something far more complicated, something closer to curiosity, or maybe conflict. This wasn't instinct. This wasn't logic. This was something else entirely. The pup whimpered again, weaker than before. Its paws scraped at the soil like it was trying to stand, but it couldn't get the strength to lift its own head. One leg was curled awkwardly beneath its belly. It hadn't eaten in days. Its breathing was ragged, and still it didn't cry for help anymore. It had stopped believing help would come. That did something to her. The bobcat looked around. There was no sign of humans, no scent of another dog, no carcass nearby. This puppy had been left here, not lost. Left. And if she walked away now, the forest would finish what someone else had started. She paced in a tight circle, tail flicking in. Irritation. This made no sense. She was a solitary hunter. She didn't raise young that weren't her own. But then she looked down again, and the pup did something that shattered the last line of hesitation. It scooted forward, barely 2 inches, and pressed its head against her paw. Just touched it, as if it had already accepted its fate, and wanted to feel something kind before the end. She stood there frozen. Even the wind stopped moving. The trees didn't sway. The forest held its breath, and then the bobcat sat down beside the puppy. It wasn't a decision made with thought, it was primal, wordless, a moment where a wild creature did what no one expected, not even herself. She leaned in, and for the first time in that pup's short, pain-wrapped life, warmth touched its fur. She stayed beside him through the night. She didn't sleep. Her ears twitched at every sound, the flap of distant wings, the creak of branches, the scuttle of rodents in the leaves, but she didn't move. She licked the pup's face once awkwardly, as if trying to mimic something she only half remembered from raising her own. Then she lay still, eyes glowing in the dark, and guarded a creature she should have abandoned. When the sun began to rise, casting pale light over the forest floor, the pup stirred. Its body trembled as it shifted closer to her, crawling weakly against her belly for warmth. The bobcat didn't resist. She stayed, letting it lean into her, her muscles taut with confusion. But her breath slow and calm. Something ancient had taken hold, a kind of protective instinct that didn't care about species or survival. It only cared that something so small, so fragile, was still trying to live. Later that morning, when the birds finally returned to their calls and the light filtered through the canopy like gold, the bobcat stood. The pup tried to follow, collapsed once, then stood again, shakily, clumsily. She looked back once, and that was all it took. It followed her. The most unthinkable thing had already happened, and the forest would never forget it. It didn't take long for the forest to notice. A bobcat with a puppy trailing behind her wasn't just unnatural, it was impossible. But it was happening. Every step the bobcat took, the puppy followed, stumbling at first, then more confidently. His tiny legs shook under the weight of his body, but he kept going. She didn't wait for him, she didn't guide him. She just moved forward, always glancing back once to make sure he was still there. By the third day, they had found shelter beneath a ridge, tucked between twisted tree roots and hanging moss. A dry patch of earth gave them rest. She brought him food, not much, only what she could carry. Bits of scavenged meat, the remains of a squirrel she would have never shared with another predator. But now she was offering it to a creature that couldn't hunt, couldn't protect itself, and didn't even belong here. She watched him eat, clumsy, eager, starved. The way his ears perked up every time a bird called above them. The way he ran in circles chasing leaves until his paws gave out, and he collapsed in the dirt with his tongue out, panting from joy. He had no fear left in him, not because he was brave, but because he believed she would keep him safe. That terrified her. More than anything, she wasn't made to protect others. She wasn't trained to raise anything that didn't share her instincts, and yet she found herself staying close when he slept, curling around him when the wind picked up at night, growling softly when coyotes howled too near. The forest was watching, but she didn't care. The lines had already been crossed. One afternoon a drone passed overhead, its faint hum slicing the silence as it hovered above the clearing near the ridge. She darted into the brush, the puppy following without question. They hid beneath the ferns. The bobcat crouched low, her eyes locked on the foreign machine above. It wasn't natural. It wasn't safe. The puppy whimpered beside her, not from fear of the drone, but from sensing her tension. The drone belonged to a wildlife research team surveying the area. They were tracking a rare bobcat known to travel alone. What they found on their monitors that night left the room in stunned silence. Is that a dog? Where did it come from? She's not attacking it, she's watching it. They replayed the footage again and again, each frame defying every rule they'd known about. Predatory behavior. The bobcat wasn't hunting. She wasn't tolerating. She was guarding, protecting. There was no mistaking it. The pup wasn't prey. It was hers now. The team sent a crew out the next day to locate them, not to capture, just to observe. But when they reached the ridge, the makeshift den beneath the roots was empty. Only faint paw prints remained, large ones and smaller ones side by side, heading deeper into the forest where no trails remained. She had moved them. She knew they had been seen. The forest had offered them a pocket of safety, and now even that was threatened. So she did what all mothers do when the world gets too close. She disappeared into it, and the puppy didn't hesitate for a second. The search teams came in quietly, boots crunching against pine needles, hands clutching cameras, radios crackling with coordinates. They weren't hunters, they were researchers, but to a bobcat who had only ever known the language of instinct, they might as well have been predators. She had moved deeper into the forest, not out of fear, but out of certainty. Safety didn't exist near humans. She'd learned that early. And now, with a tiny, clumsy pup leaning against her side each night, that old lesson rang louder than ever. But the researchers weren't the only ones who had noticed. A local hiker had posted a blurry photo online. her tawny shape slipping between trees, a small pup just behind it. "Weirdest thing I've seen in 10 years, the caption read. Within hours, the post went viral. Wildlife forums lit up. Headlines called it, "The oddest pair in nature." And with attention came opinions, too many of them. Some said they needed to be rescued. Others insisted it was too dangerous to interfere. But no one seemed to realize what she already knew. They weren't lost. They were choosing each other. Still, the forest grew less quiet with each passing day. More people, more noise, more eyes watching from behind lenses and blinds. The bobcat kept moving. She carried the pup in her jaws when he got too tired to walk. She stopped hunting during the day, afraid the sound would draw attention. Hunger gnawed at her, but she never let him go unfed. She gave him the softest parts, licking his face clean afterward as if trying to convince herself he was still okay. Then came the thunder, not from the sky, but from the ground. ATVs, 4 of them, sent in by a rescue team convinced they were helping. Their mission was simple: capture the pup, relocate him, give him a chance at survival away from the wild. No one asked whether he'd already found it. She heard them before they got close. The growl she released shook through her bones. She nudged the pup awake, his body still curled in sleep, his breathing peaceful. But that peace vanished as the engines roared louder. She licked his face once, then pushed him behind a rock, flattening her body low against the forest floor. The team spotted her first. "There! The bobcat's up ahead!" One moved forward slowly, arms out. No tranquilizer, no net, just soft words and open palms. She didn't attack. She didn't run. She stood between them and the pup with her fur raised and her tail stiff. The look in her eyes wasn't feral. It was heartbreak. The puppy, unaware of the danger, tried to crawl toward her. His legs were shaky, his ears folded back, his eyes wide with confusion. The researcher reached for him but stopped, because she growled again. A deep, guttural sound that didn't say, "I'm dangerous." It said, "He's mine." Silence fell across the forest. The man lowered his arms. He backed away slowly. He looked at the others and shook his head. "We can't take him from her, not like this." And just like that, the bobcat turned. She grabbed the puppy by the scruff and vanished into the trees one last time. No one followed. They knew the wild had spoken. No one saw them after that day. The researchers returned to the clearing where she had stood guard, but there were no prints, no fur, no sign of where they'd gone. The puppy hadn't left a trail. The bobcat had made sure of that. She had moved fast, cutting through the thickest brush, keeping to shadows, hiding not just from predators but from the idea that someone might try to take what was now hers. The forest, once loud with human footsteps and curiosity, grew quiet again. Weeks passed. The buzz died down. The online post faded into the background of 1,000 other stories. People moved on. But Miri didn't. She was the youngest researcher on the team, quiet and soft-spoken, but the only one who had stood perfectly still when the bobcat had growled and the others were ready to move. She hadn't said much then, but now, every morning, she returned alone to the edge of the clearing, just to watch, not to chase, not to capture, just in case they were still out there. The ridge looked different now, greener, wilder. A few broken branches suggested recent movement, but nothing solid, nothing proven. Until the 3rd morning, Miri spotted it in the dirt near the edge of the creek that had started flowing again since the last rain, a single paw print, smaller than a bobcat's, wider than a fox's. Right beside it, a larger, clearer print. Sharp pads, claws slightly visible, leading away from the water and vanishing into the tall grass. She didn't follow. She just smiled. Because some things aren't meant to be studied. Some things are meant to be left alone, so they can live. Farther, into the woods, where no paths were carved and no maps led, the bobcat rested beneath a fallen log, her body curled protectively around the now-growing pup. He wasn't as small as he had been. His legs were steadier. His belly no longer showed every rib. He still limped slightly when he ran, favoring the paw that had been injured long ago. But he ran. He explored. He yawned, with his head thrown back and his tongue lolling out, clumsy and ungraceful, unlike anything born of the forest. She watched him with the patience of something that had once been alone and never expected not to be again. She taught him how to hide beneath silence, how to smell the change in wind, how to freeze at the rustle of danger, and how to crouch low until it passed. He never hunted, but he tried. She brought food, still warm, still fresh, dropping it beside him and letting him chew with his dull, untrained teeth. He slept beside her every night, curling into the soft of her belly as if he'd never known cold. And when coyotes howled, he pressed closer. When owls swept through the night sky, she wrapped her tail tighter around his body. They didn't speak the same language, but they didn't have to. What she had lost, he had filled. What he had never been given, she had given, freely. And somehow, against every law of nature, they had become something no one could explain, something neither science nor instinct could fully name. Family. Back near the ranger station, the staff quietly removed the file. No more tracking missions, no more drone surveillance, no more headlines. The story wasn't over, it had simply moved beyond their reach. But in the weeks that followed, stories began to circle, quiet whispers from hikers, farmers, field workers. A tawny shadow glimpsed between trees, followed by something smaller, fluffier, bounding awkwardly behind, always just far enough away to question whether it was real, always disappearing before anyone could get close. One man claimed he saw them drinking from the edge of a river, side by side. Another swore the Bobcat growled when he reached for a camera, forcing him to lower it. Miri heard every story, and with each one, she wrote nothing down. She simply listened, because she understood now. This wasn't just a moment, this was a life. One born out of abandonment and instinct, and a decision no one could have predicted, and sometimes the forest decides what stays, not the humans. One afternoon, after a long patrol, Miri sat alone at the edge of the woods. The air was warm, the sky flickering orange with the first sign of sunset. She looked up, and for just a second she saw them, not clearly, just movement, a rustle in the grass, a bobcat pausing at the edge of a slope, the flash of a puppy's ears behind her. They looked at her, just for a breath, not afraid, not curious, just come. Then they turned and disappeared back into the trees. She didn't follow. She didn't need to, because what had once been unthinkable was now simply true. And in the wild, there are no fairy tales, only moments that change everything. This was one of them.